Sopatveva to our audience. As part of the conversation that we carried over through the channel Paradise Isle, I would like to introduce today another scholar of Sri Lankan origin who currently lives in Canada to this discussion of Hela history and Buddhism and also world literature. And because Mr. Newton Ranavira is a doctoral candidate at the University of Toronto in Canada currently. So when I came to know about his scholarly work and accomplishments, so then I thought to get in touch with him and then, start a narrative or conversation for the behalf of our Sri Lankan audience here. And Mr. Newton Ranavira is a member of the League of Canadian Poets, and he's also a certified English teacher in the province of Ontario. And his doctoral thesis is poetry as a cultural artifact in mediating second language writing. And he has been, I believe, so over 20 years, he mentioned to me that he is analyzing the world-known drama of Oedipus, right? And which is a world-known drama. And he is going into very details of that drama in terms of, identifying different Buddhist concepts, and which has been done before. And superficially, you will see in Oedipus, the drama, a certain narrative. But if you go into the depth, you will find certainly a lot of different concepts which are alien to those people who wrote them. And for that reason, I'm going to introduce you today, Mr. Newton Ranavira from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, into this conversation. And I welcome Mr. Newton Ranavira for this conversation. Sopatteva, Mr. Newton Ranavira, I came to know that you have been doing research and writing a lot of articles about the Greek literature, and with regards to Greek literature and some other issues related to Buddha Desana as well. So for that reason, I was thinking that we can entertain a discussion here about how the Buddhist influence came to Greece, or vice versa, whether Buddhism came from Greece or Buddhism went to Greece from Hela nation. So that is actually the fundamental question that I would like to clarify today with your knowledge and the research you have already accomplished.
Okay, when we discuss, I think, this reciprocal relationship, I think there is this myth that it is the West that civilizes us. It's a story that both, those who are in the West and those who are in our countries, repeatedly try to socialize. So before discussing this issue of this reciprocal relationship, I think we had better first start our discussion today with this popular Western heroic epic, right? So we call the victor's tale. I think it is a good place for us to begin our discussion.
Right.
Right. Okay. In this, popular Western heroic epic, because since it is the victor's tale, the victimizer's tale, the colonizer's tale, let's say the victor's tale, they all the time divide the world into two. That's what they usually do, as in any other heroic tale. Heroic epics like these Homer's two epics, Iliad and Odyssey, and then Valmiki's Ramayana and what is the other one? Mahabharata, right? Mahabharata. So they divide the world into two. And in this, in these epic tales, who we find are stereotypical or two-dimensional, right? Flat characterization, in which we see only heroes, and the opposite, villains. There are no complex human beings, right? Instead, these divided characters.
Right.
And then, let's say, those who are let's say, gods, and then the other place, the devils, right? The demons, and then civilized people, those who represent the West, always the victors. They are the civilized, and us, the victimized, ironically, right? Ironically, the victimized are the uncivilized.
Yeah. Right.
And
it means that, so the Western thought exactly divides the social issues and people and everything else in totally in black and white kind of two sides, right?
yeah,
So it doesn't include that complexity of human behavior.
Okay,
yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So, and then again, I missed this word, literate and the illiterate, right? Ironically, always we, the victimized, the colonized, are all often represented as the illiterate, whereas we know that we had a great history, right? Yeah. And they deny this history as well. And this, in their attempt to, represent us as illiterate people, they usually, the colonizers, the victors of this tale, they disfigured, distorted, right? Disfigured and distorted our history. Sometimes they changed the dates, they distorted the dates. And the most ironical thing is that sometimes they displaced or moved historically significant people, let's say significant people, from one place to another place as a strategy to say that they are higher and we are lower.
Right. So that means so they will transfer superior figures into other nations and tell them, so this is what it is, and so you are like this, and so they will basically downgrade or basically it's a way of belittling actually. So the rest of the world, right? Even though it's not stated directly. Oh no, you are or else I would say it tells you you are less worthy than us. So that is the message that it communicates, right?
Yeah, that's what they usually do.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then, yes, do you want to say anything? Anything to add?
No. Go ahead.
Okay, and then, so once we, consider, let's say, analyze this tale, this, Victor's tale, it seems to us that what they are writing, what they have, this is not a written tale. This is something that they have socialized, and they have been socializing, right? Parallel to this, they have written some minor tales. For an example, King Solomon's Mines at worldwide, and then the Jungle Boy, the Indian one, and then the Jungle Tide, a Sri Lankan, again, representing Sri Lankan life, and the Village in Jungle, a classical one, which our scholars, Sri Lankan educated, those people say that, identify as the best novel written during and after colonization, representing the reality of Sri Lankan lifestyle, which is not true, right? Even in this novel, what you find are two-dimensional people. The colonizers, the white people, always they are the just. They are the civilized, they are the kind, they are the superior. And us, people like Silendu and those, Mudalali, right? Mudliar, they are the uncivilized. Those people are the illiterate. This is how they represent this world.
Right.
Which is again not true. Again, this is a strategy. That is what we need to understand as to why they did this, as to why they divide the world into two, and then socialize or try to socialize this fabricated tale. Right? That's something that we need to understand. It's because those colonial nations didn't have a long history. None of these countries, like Belgium, I have written these names, usually I forget names, right? Portugal, and then Netherlands, France, England, all these countries, their history doesn't go back to, their histories don't go back to, more than the 5th century BC.
Right.
Not the 5th century BC, I'm sorry, 5th century AD, right?
Yeah.
There are only 2 countries, Roman, history of which goes back to second millennium, right? Sorry, 2nd century BC. And then the next one, Greece, which has, whose history goes back to the 5th century or beyond. Right. So all the time, what they try to do is to restrict our history to the 3rd century BC.
That means
right?
they forget all the things. That means, after what we call AD years, right? And BC is totally before Christ is totally forgotten. And so assume with the assumption that there was no civilized culture before that. Right?
Yeah, that's what they want to say. To do.
So it is an artificial limitation, an artificial, drawing a line that this is uncivilized, right? And which divides the world into 2 distinctly different categories of basically, civilized and uncivilized, and it is we who civilized you kind of an attitude.
Yeah, that's what they want to do, because they are so-called, center of civilization, Greece, right? Its history doesn't go more than back to 5th century BC, maybe 7th century. So all the history of all the other countries like ours then should be limited to 3rd century or 5th century BC, and our history shouldn't go beyond theirs.
Right.
So that is what this is a deliberate, deliberately fabricated tale. So that, as you say, to pretend that they are superior, they are higher, which is totally,
it's a fabricated narrative.
Yeah. And then, but once we, let's say, once we read their history, let's say philosophy or whatever, then we see sometimes Buddhism in their text, let's say philosophy and those other texts.
Right.
I feel that those, colonizers knew this, or they had been aware of this even before they landed our countries. They knew this.
Right.
And it is this fact that they wanted to hide.
Right.
It is this fact that they wanted to neglect, deny. It is for this purpose they divided the world into 2. Civilized and uncivilized, so that they can misdirect us.
Right. In fact, Mr. Ranavira, now I see a certain concept, actually, what the Buddha taught us, right, in his pristine Dhamma, how this operates. In fact, now I can relate to what you're saying. That means, so there's something called Tiparivatta in Buddha's teachings. One is Vatta, the other one is Parivatta, and the third one is Vivatta. So now Sangvatta means you create the world, and then after some time, this created world becomes the practical world for people. That means, so that is in which they live in. It is almost like a delusion. It is the delusion that first created, and then we begin to live in a delusion, and then believing that delusion is the reality. Right. And that is actually what has happened through your narrative, what I'm gathering as. So this is exactly what, in line with what the Buddha taught, right? So now they created a Sangvatta, and now we are living in that Parivatta, right? And we believe firmly
in
what
that delusion,
they say.
Okay, you can continue. Yeah.
No, go ahead. No, I just want to make a comment just to check whether 2 of us are on the same page.
According to their tale, then Greece is the cradle of democracy. That's what they said, right? It's the cradle of democracy, and then the civilized force, and the fountain of knowledge. And it is Greece, West, through Greece, as they say, civilized the whole world, literate and literated us. They did everything, right? They did everything. We didn't have anything before that. That's what they wanted to prove. And the irony here is, again, they cannot, socialize this tale alone without having our people's help. Right? Help of those people, those insiders, they are outsiders, right? They need to get this help from the insiders. And even these people, unfortunately, they helped the colonized the colonizers to, socialize this tale.
Right.
So for an example, I could quote what I can remember his name. Perhaps I may remember, let's see. Yes, Professor Merlin Pieris. Is that okay if I could tell their names? Because
I think, yeah, because these are published documents, right?
Yeah, these are published documents, right? He was a professor earlier. Now he's retired from Peradeniya. For Professor Merlin Pieris. He has written several articles, and he has published these articles in Royal Asiatic Society, which is a colonial agency, right?
Yeah.
That, continued, socializing this tale, writing different articles, different texts, helping them to write such texts really. And in his articles, one is Yona Sabhagavattu. You can find this in, anyone can find this in Royal Asiatic Journal. And then he has written a text, Greek motifs in Buddhist tales, Jataka tales, right? As he says really, he says here that when writing Mahavansa, the historical chronicle, Venerable Mahanama, right? Venerable Mahanama used or had influence from Greek mythology, right? He quotes, he cites several examples.
Right.
One is this story of the tale of Vijaya and Queni. That's one of the tales that he refers to. And there are so many other tales, like Kavantis raising the army. He compares it with Cyrus, right? Cyrus attempt to, King Cyrus, right, in Persia, Persian King Cyrus attempt to raise the army. He compares them, right? And then there's another, there are so many such tales really. And in addition, he says that even for Jataka tales, we had influence from Greek myths.
Right.
What he says, when I read this, but when I compare these stories, really, even I felt that what he says is not true, not untrue. It's true. Right?
Yeah. Oh yes, the theory that you are suggesting, I can see through it, because the thing is, now all those characters these are prototypes for writing our rewriting our history, right? And now if you take all these the characters that you mentioned, right, the Cyrus the Great, who is an army to invade all these Indian territory and everything, so that is quite comparable to King Kavantissa and King Dutuyamunu, right? And so these are, and even if you go beyond, now you mentioned Vijay and Kueni, right?
Yeah.
So that is also like what's a Greek king's name? Oedipus, right?
That is Odysseus.
No, in Ilias and in Odyssey. In
Odyssey, Odysseus is that hero, Odyssey.
Yeah, that he goes to an island, and then Cyrus the witch, right?
Yeah, Circe.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that means, so it's almost like Vijay Kueni story.
Vijay Kueni story, yeah.
So then we can basically go into the fact that these stories probably have been creations based on the prototypes from those Homer's literature.
Yes, those Greek mythology, Greek legends.
Right.
And then in this tale, really, tale of Vijay and Kueni, the first part, as you said, right? It is from this, Homer's Iliad, Odyssey's journey back to Ithaca, right? And his encounter with Circe in the island called Aia, right? So this is the story that he used to compose the first part of Vijay Kueni's story, Vijay Kueni tale. And for the latter, the second part, he used another tale that is Medea myth, right? Medea myth. So this is exactly similar. So we cannot deny what Professor Merlin says. And then yesterday I read another, right? Read another in the sense, really, once I recall this Siri Sangabo story, it seems to me like, staging the second part of Oedipus' tale, right? King Oedipus drama, stages second part there, Oedipus, blinds his own eyes and goes to the mountain, Mount Sitaran, the forest. And here, King Siri Sangabo goes to the forest and then sacrifices his head.
Right.
So it's like second part of this tale. So this is again, to be true, this is exactly quite similar to Oedipus. Not the myth. I'm not referring to myth, but the drama. I have this question here. That is, how did this venerable what's his name? Mahanama. How did he come to know this drama? Yeah. Because he's referring to here is not that myth, Greek legend, but the drama. The problem is, how did he come to know it?
I think so. There is I see a connection in those two tales from Mahanama as well as from Greek or Greek mythological narratives, right? Because now, to my knowledge, great Alexander, the great king from Greece, he invaded India right after the Persian Empire, right? So now Mahanama comes to Helabima in rewriting our history in the 5th AD, right?
5th AD, yeah.
So there had been about 700 years of all these Greek narratives ruminating in Indian territory, and people got used to these kind of things as their own. He probably brought those things to here to rewrite our history.
Okay, I have this question too, really. Now, we have several questions, right? We can raise several questions. Now, I mean, this, let's say, the Greek influence on our own tales suggests us another thing, that is, it raises a question, that is, what is this relationship that existed between Hela people, let's say, and those Greek people?
Right.
Right? Can we limit it to Alexander's conquer in India? Right? Or we have to question whether this goes back to 5th century BC. Right? So we cannot limit this to, limit this to 3rd century. It might go back to 5th century BC. Whatever what we can find here is there had been a close relationship between Hela people, right, and then Greek people. And that is interesting thing. Those earlier Greeks were called Hellas, right? This is an interesting thing. They were called Hellas. Right. And here,
it's called Helena, right? So Greece's first name was Hellenic culture.
That this Hellenic name is used later on. Right?
Is it?
During the time of Alexander. And before that, they were called Hellas, right? Which they derive from this word at Helen or something. Right? But whatever it is, they were called Hellas. So there's again some sort of relationship between these two words. One is Hela, and they were Hellas, called Hellas. So we don't know. There should be lots of complexities here. This is not simple. Right? Reading history, revisiting history, it's not really simple. It's so complex. It's not black and white. Right? It's not black and white. Okay.
It sounds like there's something hidden, right? It sounds like there's something. A lot of information seems to be buried in the sands of time.
Yeah. So it is this buried thing that we have to excavate. That's our duty, right? That is what we need to do. And then there is another thing, really. There is something called, usually the killers, they keep some evidence. There should be lots of evidence for us to use as hints so that we can excavate this, right?
Right.
Okay, so there's an evidence for us. I find an evidence in this tale, The History of Ceylon, written by William Knighton. Right? He should have published this in 1846. Right? And then again, this is not to support our history. It is again to support their heroic tale, that Western heroic tale. But accidentally, he keeps some evidence here, but not in the content area, main content area, but in the appendix something irrelevant for him, but which is important for us. Right? So there's a good, if you give me some time, I have something to refer to you, right? A similar tale. It's from Chinua Achebe's, because we can use all these sources for this. Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. In this, he says in the end, this colonial agent, right, colonial representative, tried to write a story about these people's history. And he's going to, as the writer says, narrator says, he's going to spend only one paragraph, right? Only one paragraph. The question here, he raises here is whether he can write the history of these black people with one paragraph. Can they do it? Right?
Yeah,
and ironically, he writes a whole book, right? Because he says that it cannot be done with one paragraph. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
But this man again here writes our history, compares Buddhism with Greek philosophy in the appendix using not a chapter, several paragraphs. Can he do it? Right? It's again ironical, right? It's very, because it is not important for him. It is not significant for him, right? Okay, so he sidetracks them. But it's an evidence for us, right? It's an evidence. In this, he says that
you can't wipe out evidence completely, right?
Yeah.
You cannot wipe out totally. And
they cannot do it. They keep evidence all the time.
Yes.
Right? And here in this appendix, he says Greek philosophers like Thales, Pythagoras, and then Plato, 5th century philosophers, they went to Egypt for their studies. That is what they say, what he says. And in their philosophy, there is some sort of knowledge which is not inherently Greek. Something alien to Greece. And again, he says that it is not
Greece or to Egypt.
They went to Egypt,
learned
some knowledge, and brought it back to Greece. And now we can see this in their philosophy. Plato's philosophy, Pythagoras, and then Thales' philosophy. Right? But this part of their philosophy is not inherently Greek. It's something alien to Greece. That's what he says. And then again, he says that this cannot belong to Egypt either, because there has not been any such famous philosopher in Egypt. And then he said this knowledge should be from somewhere else. This is Buddhism. That's what he says. This is Buddhism. And then he compares these philosophies. Plato with Buddhism, and then Thales with Buddhism, and then Pythagoras with Buddhism. Right? And he says that this is Buddhism, and it should have brought to Egypt from somewhere else.
Okay, so if I understood you correctly, when Thales, Pythagoras, and Plato and all these people, whoever who went to Egypt at the time, when they came to Egypt to learn something or to do whatever they did at the time, so Buddhism existed in that land, or something alien to Egypt existed in Egypt, and so that is why they thought that this is not Egyptian, but this is something from a foreign land. Right?
Yeah, from foreign land. And there is another fact. This is a fact really which we cannot deny again. In order to, if you want to find some connection between Helabima and then Egypt, right? There should have been definitely there should have been a naval, what is it called? A trade relationship between Egypt and Helabima. And then in this area, this place, it means Libya, not Libya, Egypt, and then this part. What it is called, new country called, what it is, Israel, right? Yeah, here Israel, and then here Egypt, and this place should be Persia. In this part, definitely there should have been a trade center.
Right.
A center there, because this is Mediterranean Sea, and the other part of the Mediterranean Sea is the Europe.
Right, yeah.
And if we say that Sri Lanka had been a center, right? Center of trade, there should have been again this place a center, right? And then Buddhism, we can presume that those whom?
Right.
Those traders, right?
Right.
Those traders definitely should have took Buddhism to Egypt, right?
Right.
That is what should have happened.
Uh-huh. Right. It is a known fact throughout the some of the world history as well as from Hela history that the traders were mariners who sailed in ships to other countries for trading, because now in I believe in somewhere in a port, when they excavated the port or the harbor in I believe south of Bombay or somewhere, or maybe north of Bombay, so then that area, so they discovered some Sri Lanka, some Hela maritime evidence, right, that traders had been there. That means, and also in China there is a lot of evidence because they have written in their scripts that bigger ships came from Helabima to China. So that means this Hela nation of ours, our ancestors were good mariners, and they also had ships were worthy of sailing throughout the world. So that is how I believe the Arabian traders came to Helabima for spices and gems and every other trading item in the ancient world. So now when traders come, usually I can fathom that piece of knowledge. Like when you go somewhere, you bring something back too.
Especially knowledge at the time, right? Especially knowledge at that time.
Right. Likewise, when Hela traders went to the Arabian world to sell their goods, so then they took not only their trading items, they may have took their knowledge as well, like Buddha Dhamma, and like various other technologies that our ancestors have entertained.
Yeah. And then again, I want to make a suggestion. That is, we need to find some evidence from this area to say that ancestors travel to this place for trades, right? Our readership may help us finding some evidence for this. For this area, especially for this area, because it is here that we can find this, we can locate this link between Buddhism, Helabima, and then Greece. Right? So we need to find some evidence for this place. So Egypt and then Israel, this part of the world.
Right.
Okay. And then here, what I am doing, as you started with, when you said this at the beginning of this discussion, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm studying here, what I'm trying to do this in order to find this relationship between Buddhism and Greece, I do this study not in philosophy. I'm not going to do it now, right? Later, let's do it, not now. Since I am very much interested in literature, I do my study in reference to literature.
Yeah.
Right? And here, okay, when I do this in literature, I see a good evidence there. It's like an ancient, maybe the most earliest stone inscription, right? It's like a stone inscription here. It is Oedipus, because we don't find such an early inscription anywhere else. But in Greece, this is that inscription, Oedipus, in which we find deep concepts of Buddhism, right? Deep concepts of Buddhism. So I started studying this drama for several years. Not 10, maybe 20 years, but early I read, when I read this and discussed with students, I considered it as anyone else would do, a wow drama, a wonderful drama, a great drama, that's all. But recently, with some inspiration that I got maybe from you, right? I started trying to find Buddhism in it, because I sense earlier too, people say, but they just give some hints, not in-depth studies. And having these hints, I wanted to do some in-depth study. Then I studied, I did a periphery study. When I say periphery study, I did my study in, 14th, 15th century, 16th century, let's say 15th, 16th Shakespearean dramas, and then 18th, 19th, right? 19th century Ibsen, and then 20th, 19th, both 19th and 20th, Anton Chekhov, and then 20th Hemingway, Achebe here, Bertolt Brecht, Arthur Miller, right? I did some periphery studies as well. Then I see that these people, these writers have used Oedipus, the center one, as their handbook,
right?
Source book, their Bible, right? Their Bible, their Jataka tale, their Sutra, right?
The prototype.
Yeah. So that is their handbook, right? For the drama writers, actors, actresses, they are, I mean, they are expected to read this. They're expected to follow this together with Aristotelian poetics. Once we need to do this study having both these two texts. One thing is Aristotle Poetics, which is an analysis to this one. Sometimes I feel like identifying this King Oedipus as a Buddhist Sutra, Buddhist Dharmadeshana, and then Aristotelian Poetics as a Gatapada or something, an analysis to this, right? So when I see Bertolt Brecht's Caucasian Chalk Circle, it's quite known to you, right? Caucasian Chalk Circle, there are certain concepts, right? There are two concepts that arrests my attention. One is this alienation effect, right? The familiar term for us is this Buddhist term is Yoniso Manasikara, right? Yoniso Manasikara. And there is another thing, another concept that is, I mean, unconventional hero. Because we find in King Oedipus an unconventional hero.
Right.
Because in Oedipus legend, that Oedipus myth, the man whom we find is utterly useless, meaningless, worthless, a mean person. But Sophocles in his drama turns this man into a great human being with great human potentials. From where did he get this impression? From where did he get this impression? Once he read it deeper into the drama, it seems to us clear that he got from inspiration from the Buddha himself, how he treated people like Angulimal. He turns Angulimal into a greater human being. So these are the tales, these are the precedences that he used to create, to portray such a great man, or turning a mean person into a great human being. Right? So with these instances, hence, I want to do a deeper study into it so that I can find deep Buddhist concept to discuss, which later on, I think I need your help later.
In fact, here now, when you're talking about King Oedipus, as well as, now let's take that Bertolt Brecht, story, The Chalk Circle, which is a German, drama, right? And that reminds me of Ummagga Jataka, that comes in the Jataka book, because that's Mahoshada, the character Mahoshada.
Ummagga Jataka,
Ummagga Jataka, right? And Mahoshada is exactly, one of his decisions represent Chalk Circle, beyond doubt.
Yeah, he used that tale. Right?
And the Jataka tale is a couple of centuries older than the Chalk Circle.
That's it. And then again, in addition to using Jataka tale as a subject matter, or tale within tale, he uses some concepts. He uses Buddhist concepts to create different new drama concepts.
And now it goes back to, now it can be, reciprocally, we can see how King Oedipus received that kind of, heroic interpretation in the end.
It does, yeah.
Right?
Right. That social deviant becomes a great hero. Not an epic hero, but a moral hero. Right? That's
exactly
the difference. Okay, now let's see. I would like to discuss with you within this drama. First, the characterization, only two elements, two basic drama elements, right? So that we can nourish our discussion, support our discussion. One thing is characterization, and the second is the plot construction, because these are key elements here in which we find Buddhism, right? Buddhist concept. Okay, now let's see here, when we discuss the characterization here, I feel that, right? I feel that I understand that when portraying Oedipus' character, what we are referring to here, because we need to tell our readership, what you are referring to here is not the Oedipus legend, Oedipus myth, which they might find ridiculous. What you are referring to is Oedipus, the king, the Sophoclean drama, right? The Sophoclean drama. What is more important for us is not this myth, not this story, but how Sophocles interprets it. It is in this interpretation that we find Buddhism.
Yeah, that means the message, right? The message. Yeah.
The drama. In the drama in which he interprets, gives lots of interpretation, Buddhist interpretation. He gives to this tale a Buddhist kind of interpretation, right? And then let's see here, characterization. When portraying this character, Oedipus' character, it seems to us that he portrays this character in the mold of Buddha himself. Having Buddha as the model, because we see most of the characteristics that Oedipus has are quite similar to what we see in the most enlightened one, the Buddha. And whenever he speaks, his words sounds to us like Buddha's words, right? Okay, now let's take only one. Before that, I would like to cite another, draw a snapshot from the two tales, right? To make this more interesting. The one thing is, now we can remember this naming ceremony.
Yeah.
And then what ascetic Asita said.
Asita, yeah.
Yeah, first he smiled and then cried. And then he was asked as to why he simultaneously smiled and cried.
Yeah.
Right? And we know what he said, right? This prince would become the Buddha, right? That's why he smiled. And then I won't be there then.
He won't be, right.
Yeah, so he cried. We can find a similar thing here in the drama. The one Corinthian messenger comes to Oedipus' palace with a message. He says that once you listen to this story, sometimes it might make you sad, happy, and sad. Then Jocasta asks him, what is this thing that makes us simultaneously happy and sad? Right? Something very similar. This is let's say, we can take this as an isolated incident.
Right.
Having this, we cannot say that there is Buddhism in this text, but we can see even in deep concept Buddhism. This is just an isolated incident, example, but there are so many, right? If this is the only one, I would not say that there is Buddhism here, but there are lots of things, okay, now let's see this character, Oedipus' character, and then his motto, or his life philosophy. Oedipus' life philosophy is, this is what, as he says, his motto or life philosophy. To help his fellow men with all his power is man's most noble work. That's what Oedipus says. And he does it at every moment and at every second, right? He does everything possible to help people. So is it not what the Buddha did after having enlightenment? Is it not his own motto as well? Right? In which he said to the first disciples, Charatha Bhikkhave, Charikam Bhajana Hitaya, Bhajana Sukhaya, Deva Manusaya, right? Go monks, wander, guide those people to get across this samsaric fear, samsaric dukkha, right?
Yep. It's quite analogous, yeah.
Yeah, these are analogs. These are quite similar, right? Okay, now let's take certain characteristics, other characteristics. Now that is the first thing, personal philosophy, quite similar in both. And then the most intelligent one. Oedipus is represented as the most intelligent one, right? Those Greek people, Greek citizens, they had millions of gods, let's say. They have each god for each task. But though they have been surrounded by lots of gods, they come to Oedipus saying that they rely on Oedipus' intelligence, right? As the people went to Buddha, though there had been so many gods, relying on his intelligence, right? They took refuge of him. They didn't have other refuge, right? Here too, these people, now there's a famine in the country, but they don't have any other refuge than Oedipus. They rely on his intelligence.
Right.
Okay,
the knowledge.
Yeah. So this is another example. And then could I refer to another characteristic as well? The most kind.
Sure, yeah,
the most kind, the most sympathetic, most empathetic. That is how Oedipus is represented here.
Yeah, that's Buddha nature, right?
Buddha nature again, right? This man, okay, when people come, he says, okay, when you cry, there is no one else who would cry more than anyone else would do. I cry more than anyone else would do, right? And then again, he's not just a talker. He walks his talk. As we say, yathavadi tathakari. Oedipus himself is such a person. He never tells lies. That is the second one. The next one, the most kind, sympathetic. Right? He does everything possible. He says, I don't have anything else. Sorry, I can do anything for you. Right? There is nothing that I won't do to help you.
Right.
And he really does. He really tries to do everything to help them, to relieve them from this present famine, or let's use this present term, corona, right?
From the predicament, right? So
that's what he says. And he does everything. He sacrificed finally even his eyes, let's say, finally sacrifices his eyes on whose behalf? On his people's behalf, on the others' behalf. So in that sense, he's like a Buddhist disciple, not Buddhist, let's say, right? He's a Buddhist. Okay, and then let's take another, truthful. He's very truthful, very honest. I can cite an example so that our readership may understand this and read the text and explore more evidence, right? So we need to give them some hints. Now, one character here, Creon, comes from Apollo's temple with the message as to what or who caused the famine. He meets Oedipus and then asks whether they can get inside the palace and then tell him this God's message. And then Oedipus says, it is very surprising. He says, no, we don't need to go inside. Tell me here before all. Because he doesn't have anything to hide from the people. He says, I am worried about these people than my own life. Right? A trustworthy person who thinks always of the other people's welfare, not of him. Such an honest man. I don't find any such king in the real political world. Right? They just repeat his motto. Even I can remember SWRD Bandaranaike repeatedly use it. Minisage parama yutukama minisata seve kirimai. Repeated, the hackneyed. Right?
It's a quote from the Buddha.
It is quote from the Buddha again, right?
Yeah.
It's quote from the Buddha, and then Sophocles copied it, right? And then gives it to Oedipus, and then those other politicians repeatedly use it in their political campaigns, just for political power, to gain power. But we don't find this kind of a great king, right? A great leader in this political arena, political world. No, even in fictitious world. This is the only person that I find in whom I find this trustworthiness, this honesty, duty-minded, duty consciousness, and who is willing to sacrifice even his life for the betterment of his own people. Right? Such an ideal king.
Right.
Then who should have? The question is, who should have make or convince Sophocles to create such a Buddhist character?
Right.
That's the question that we raise, that we ask from the West and the East as well, right? Who deny this relationship, who deny the Buddhist influence on Greek philosophy?
On this character,
who say that it is Greeks who civilize us? Now, what has happened is the opposite. It is Buddhism that has civilized the whole, I would say now, later on we can find lots of evidence for this. I would say the whole Western civilization. It is Buddhism that civilized them. Right?
It also an indication, like from your narrative, I got the point that most of these qualities in Oedipus' character had been known to whoever who wrote the story, right? That means it's Homer's narrative, right? Homer.
This is Sophocles. Sophocles.
Yeah. So now, if he did not know some of these concepts, whether it's Buddhism or whatever they may have referred to, he couldn't have created this kind of a character, right? And reflects exactly the qualities that we identify with with the Buddha Dhamma, right?
Yes.
So that means they had an exposure to Buddha before they wrote these kind of things. Whether how it needs to be clarified and figured out through research, right?
Yes. So these people, I mean Pythagoras, all these people lived at the same time, during the same time.
Yeah.
If we consider Sophocles wrote this drama in 429, it means he wrote this drama after let's say either 80 to 112 years of Buddha's passing away. Whatever the date that we consider, the dates that were, that's okay. Now there are two kinds of dates. That a date that we find in Buddhist chronicles, Sri Lankan chronicles, right, and the Western sources. Whatever the sources we used here, right? He wrote this drama within 80 to 110 years of Buddha's passing away. That knowledge is very fresh, it means. That knowledge is fresh. Right? During this time that we meet Pythagoras as well. So it is not written that this man went to Egypt. It seems to us that he had met, I won't say that he had met, but he had met somebody who had seen Buddha himself. Right. Otherwise, he cannot do this. He cannot otherwise do this, because we didn't discuss still the deeper things, right? Now, still we discuss the superficial things, right? We may have to have a different discussion for this to discuss those deeper Buddhist concepts that we find in King Oedipus, right? Okay. Could that be determined? The timeline, because now the Buddhist timelines were written in books since 1st century BC, and all the other timelines were created most likely after after the years, months and weeks, that concept came into existence in 1315, right? So Buddhist dating period goes way back into so that is how, and they were based on lunar calendars, not the sun calendar, like Westerners took over. But the moon calendars were more precise in ancient times here in Helabima, because our ancestors worked on moon calendars, and the months and weeks and days, 7-day weeks came in 1315, as I am aware. So for that reason, we have to go by the before current era years, so that we know exactly, because 623 is the year or that period when the Buddha was born. This time, then right, and then we know exactly, according to our records, it's 543 or 546 CE. He experienced Mahaparinibbana. Right. For that reason, so those states are pretty much recorded. This suggests to me that I think we can beyond doubt, we can go consider those numbers as more accurate. Right? What you say suggests to me that I don't need to wait for tomorrow. I can delete their dates like this now itself. Right? I mean, so these are all recorded history, right, in the Tripitaka. And in Mahabharata.
which is, I believe so, which is one of the oldest known documents in the world, Mahavansa,
Yeah.
right?
And this,
Because to my knowledge, it is Helen, our own nation started recording their own history using their language, and for the first time in recorded, human history. So that is what I'm aware of. So for that, I can beyond doubt say that this should be the right timeline. And if you that timeline, then Pythagoras, the earlier timeline that you have indicated, that falls, way after the Buddha Parinibbana.
Yeah, way after. Here's the Sophocles timeline, 497 and 406. And he wrote the drama in 429. So either 80 years, not 80 years, 110 years after.
So now, Mr. Ranavir, now I came across another journal, actually. It's called Ancient Origins, which deals with the humanities past history, right? So that says actually, so there's an article written by Mr. Flinders Petrie, and it's called of a Buddhist History During Persian Period of Egypt, circa 525 to 405 BC. Fits into this timeline of what you're saying. Actually, it supports your thesis that the Buddhism existed before. Now, this article itself says actually, if Petrie's dating is correct, Buddhism in Egypt existed 200 years before Ashoka sent his missionaries to Egypt. That means there must have been a Buddhist, or civilization in Egypt, which some grasp the Buddhist concepts, and that tells me what you are saying is pretty fall in line with the Buddhist influence in writing these, stage or the narratives, right?
Yeah.
The Buddhist influence can be, quite. It must have been quite significant.
Quite significant in this area at the time.
Changing the way they thought and how they wrote their literature. Yeah.
Okay. Shall we move on to another here? Can I, as an example? Okay, that is plot construction, because there are some drama students, teachers, right? They can see this again, right?
Right.
So in the plot construction again, what we find here in that, okay, usually we say that this is how the playwright arranges the incidents. So as to make a storyline, right? So as to make a complete story, right? But this is not the myth. This is the drama. In the drama, he arranges the incident in a different way. He uses that story, the legend, but he makes some changes. Some changes in the sense, what he writes here is, as Aristotle says, not what happened alone, but what may have happened. It is here that we find literature. It is here that we find philosophy. It is into this part that Buddhism comes in, right? So when we analyze this plot construction, we see here self-exploration, kind of self-exploration.
Right.
So here I have written central act, finding the killer. That is what we usually students, teachers discuss. Okay, this drama is about finding the killer, right? But for me, this is only a symbolic act.
Right.
This is only a symbolic problem. The real problem here is finding the truth. Not finding the killer, but finding the truth. But if we take finding the killer as the central act here, in the next incident, we can find Oedipus finding the killer outside, in the outside world, fighting with everybody as we do, right? We don't turn inside and find the problem within ourselves. Instead, we turn outside and fight with everyone, assuming that the others are wrong and I'm correct. I'm right. He does the same thing here. He does the same thing. And then in the next scene, we can see something happens here accidental, which gives him a hint to suspect his own acts. If you take this, this self-exploration, or King Satyagavesi, right? This self-exploration, we can say that for the first time, he gets a hint to suspect himself, in the sense, turn inside and do his search within himself, right? Within himself. And in the next scene, self-exploration, after this incident splits into two. I told you that Corinthian messenger comes here with a message, right? Saying that his supposed father is dead, and now Oedipus can go back to Corinth and become the king, right? And then due to some reason, that man reveals to him that Corinthian king is not his father. He here gives the first hint for him to go for looking for his own identity. All this time, he wanted to find who that killer is, whether he is the killer, right? Who that killer is within. Now he started doing, instead of finding the killer, in addition to finding the killer, who he is. So it is here this real search begins. The real search begins, this self-exploration. And then in the next scene, he recognizes everything. He recognizes who he is, who the killer is. He recognizes everything. And then there is no more. What could happen is suffering.
Right.
What could happen is suffering. In the very beginning, then maybe in the third scene, Tiresias says this. I would read this for us. How terrible to see the truth when the truth is only painful to him who sees it.
Yeah.
Right? How terrible the truth is to him who sees it. All the others ask him to spend or live day to day. Don't think of tomorrow. Right? Don't think of tomorrow. Live day to day.
Right.
Right? If you try to look for, identify yourself, if you try to do self-exploration, the result would be suffering. Right? So we Prutakjana people, right? What is it called? Prutakjana people, these lay people, right? Earthly people, what we do is just spend day to day, right? Without thinking of worrying about the history, the past, or the future, right? So it is this idea that is given here. And it is here again we see this self-exploration, this King Satyagavesi, instead of any other plot construction, any other incident here, right? There might be different interpretation. There are different interpretations, but they have not considered this interpretation because they don't have this Buddhist background.
Right. Unless you have some knowledge in the Dhamma, it's very difficult to see through this process, right?
Yeah.
If you look from a Padaparama, and in the Buddha Dhamma we call it Padaparama. That means surface knowledge. If you go with the surface knowledge, you won't able to find this kind of an process physically, right? And just on the surface. But if you go deep into analyzing the character, then only you begin to see how the process falls in line with exactly King Satyagavesi or what the Buddha did.
Yeah.
And now, after you have explained it to me, now I'm not a stage play or drama person, but from the narrative what we're discussing and what I understood, I can now see the trend, right? That this falls in line exactly with what the Buddha did, what the Bodhisattva did, before, right? And finding a recognition of truth is the enlightenment.
Yes.
And then how we started King Satyagavesi finding the killer and the quest outside, which didn't bring him any results. So he turned his way inside, and then he figured, then he had to do self-exploration.
Yeah.
And that's what brought to enlightenment, right?
Yes.
Which is very parallel and very similar.
It is. Yeah. And there is another thing, another concept that I want your attention, and then again I want your help to elaborate it. That is, Sophocles uses here some concept called, in order to develop the plot structure, he call it reversal. What we mean by reversal is moving the action always pulling the action backward. Okay, it is like this. Now we come close to know who the killer is, identify the killer, but something else happens and it goes back. And sometimes now we begin to love when the second scene, third scene passes. We love Oedipus, right? We love Oedipus because we identify him as a man with great potentials. And then we don't like to see his downfall, right? We don't like to see his downfall. One time, Jocasta comes and tries to console him. We spectators want him to get consoled, right? But here, our expectations don't happen. We are given a promise and then it is withdrawn. We are given a promise all the time and it is withdrawn. It's like this anicca, constant flux. Oh, like piyehi vipayoga dukkho, right? And then appiyehi sampayoga dukkho. What we expect don't happen. So he does this as a strategy. I think I need to help, to explain this, elaborate this further. Let's spend just 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, so you want me to explain what anicca is, right? So
yeah, what anicca is, yes.
What anicca is. So anicca is basically our mental inability to sustain what we perceive as desirable. You know, that is what constitutes life. So in life, we go after what in the Buddha Dhamma, actually what we talk about is we do undertake anything to make us feel wholesome, make us feel good, make us feel happy, right? But unfortunately, average and ordinary person does not recognize that in this endeavor of sustaining all expectations as we desired, and it is impossible because everything is a continuous flux, continuous transformation from the beginning to the end until someday everything gets perished. So this whole process is in a continuum, a perpetual transformation. So that is the reason why we won't be able to sustain our desires as we hoped for or as we expected. So that leads us to a belief called Nicca Sanya. And the Nicca Sanya is what you know as we put all our efforts to sustain that mental desire, which is not going to work. So with the belief that everything is going to feel good in the end, but it ends up always in the dukkha or afflictions, right? And I'm not going to use the word suffering because suffering is so negative connotation that doesn't entire content of dukkha. The dukkha is afflictions, life afflictions, right? Whether physical or mental, everything goes into that category. So that is dukkha. So then when once we come to the sense that, this thing cannot be sustained, so I need to own more, I need to go do more, something more. And so we keep doing, and that is how we live the life. And that is called, with the, the undercurrents, the way the Buddha explained it is Nicca Sukha Atta. Nicca Sukha Atta, right? So Nicca means it's a stage of anicca, and anicca becomes icca becomes paticca, paticca becomes nicca. So that is our attitude. The conditioned attitude is anicca, right? So we cannot sustain nicca. So not nicca, nicca sanya we cannot sustain, so we fall into afflictions, and for that reason we undertake so many things to sustain that nicca sanya, right? So in essence, what the opposite of it is anicca, dukkha, anatta. That is the reality. So what you are referring to, anicca, our inability to sustain everything what we expected or what we hoped for.
That is what happens.
That puts us into dukkha, right?
Yeah, that is what happens repeatedly here. Once we take the first two incidents, right, which we call reversal, that is what happened. We expect something, but we are given a promise, but it is withdrawn. All the time it is withdrawn, right? Okay, so here for this process, really, Aristotle in his Poetics uses two terms, really, pity and fear. And then purgation of emotion. This is a deeper concept. I think we need to discuss in a different discussion since we don't have time today. And then I want to share with you one more thing, that is what happened to Oedipus drama. Because usually in 5th century Greece, they perform these dramas in Dionysiac drama festivals. And Sophocles is considered, even by Aristotle in his Poetics, not Sophocles, this drama, this particular drama, King Oedipus, as the greatest drama, greatest tragedy in 5th century Greece, because he considered all the dramas that had been written, performed in 5th century Greece. And then he singled out this one and says, and identifies this as the greatest tragedy written, performed in Greece. And then again, this drama has produced, let's say, gave birth to several great playwrights in the West and in the world.
Right.
But unfortunately, this drama doesn't get any award. That's surprising, because this playwright, Sophocles, had won first award 18 times. And then second award for 6 times. But for this drama, the greatest drama in the world, that produced many great sons, daughters, let's say, didn't win any award.
Right.
This raises the question as to why. Right? The one thing could be those people couldn't understand the message here, this deeper message. That's one assumption, that hypothesis. The second thing, this cannot be, right? It proves false because those people, Thales, Pythagoras, Plato, and even Sophocles himself, they learned Buddhism. It suggests to us that they should have been aware. Those Greek people, Greek spectators, and the panel of judges at the Dionysiac festival should have been aware of Buddhism, should have been able to understand the deeper message. It is because they understood the second thing that they didn't give this any award, because there is Buddhism inside. Right? There is Buddhism inside. They understood it's a challenge to their belief system of beliefs, so they rejected this.
Right.
Yeah.
I see another aspect before we conclude. In fact, I said, so Buddha never received any awards, even though he served the pinnacle of knowledge, right? Ultimate knowledge, though he delivered it to the humanity never awarded him as such, right? So it's a fundamental flow of human thought, right?
Yes,
because so that's the very reason why the Buddha stated in many suttas, sabbe putagdana ummattaka, because they see the reality. As I said right at the beginning, in that little bit of a Dhamma quote, so we create our own worlds, right? The way we want to see. We wear a pair of spectacles with the yellow or red or blue or whatever the color, and then we see the world through that lens, even though we do not want to consider that there exists other colors, because that's what our intention for existence. It's a matter of survival. So we create our Sangwatta, and we begin to believe in that Sangwatta of what we create. It's a circle, right? And then we live within that circle. We call it a delusion, which is not, because it's a circle that we created by ourselves, right? We have hard time in breaking away from that circle, because breaking away from that circle is called vivatta, which is nibbana, right? So the path to nibbana is vivatta. You break away from the sansaric cycle, and then you liberate yourself. So, but you cannot do that because of these, the hardened beliefs, or the what you call the nijja sanya, which is Sukha Atta, right? And you have brought it quite I would say sensationally, right? So which is new thinking in terms of poetry and literature, to look into, the deepest message be communicated to humanity, rather than, just the sake of enjoyment, right? And there are messages entailed in these, dramas, and the playwrights have done it with purpose. But unfortunately, the generations don't see the depth of this kind of, the messages that we are trying to communicate. If we can understand these messages, these subtle messages that are being communicated through these stage plays and dramas and, all these kind of narratives, then humanity is heading for, much more wholesome worlds and wholesome, living environments rather than, just the fighting that we see all the time throughout the world.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's continue this discussion into a next round, because I know that I have a couple of more questions about, how did the Buddha Dhamma went to Egypt
and to Greece, right?
Because now this your discussion provides me enough points to think that the Buddha Dhamma must have influenced these cultures or civilizations immensely, and that is why they behind this kind of thinking. Because kind of thinking, that's why we call him Buddha, right? It is Pubbe Ananusutesu Dhammesu. That is the things that never heard before, right? In humanity. So now this thinking was never heard before in the way that I understand now from your conversation, right? So that means this should be explored further into the depths of where, as far as we can reach, because I can see the Buddha Dhamma had gone to Egypt 200 years before Emperor Ashoka from India. Means that's a time that I have a couple of very, very strong, I would say, really deep questions, because now if Buddha Dhamma went to Egypt 200 years before Emperor Ashoka, that period is the time that India was under the influence of Greece and Persians.
Yeah,
so
it is the environment
where no Buddha would be born in any where the wars and internecine warfare and all these kind of things are predominant, happening. Those are not the areas where a Buddha was born. But now, fortunately, the timelines that you have elucidated shows me that for that reason, Buddha never could have been born in India if the timeline is correct. He must have been elsewhere, and gives me to think of a different techniques and the transportation system that our Hela ancestors used. That is maritime routes, because Sri Lankan, the Naga tribe or the naval people who did international trading and internal trading through our rivers and river systems and waterways. So they had sailing mechanisms, whatever they are. I don't have any pictures to show you, but they had immense naval power at the time. I'm talking about the 6th, 7th centuries BC.
7th centuries BC,
right? So that means the Buddha Dhamma must have traveled through traders to most of the other countries if you want to set a realistic picture, rather than all this Abhuta, Ascharya, kind of, transference by going through AI and all these, if the Pratihar and all that sort of things cannot support, right? But usually people take knowledge to where they go.
Yeah, that is one thing that I would like to add here. In this drama, we don't find any such Abhuta kind of things. It means marvelous. Marvelous we don't find here. It's so realistic. That again suggests the influence that he had from Buddhism. And then again, finally, our discussion, the whole discussion again suggests, it proves this Westerners' heroic tale is a fabricated one. It's a false. It collapses like what? Okay, it collapses. It's not true. And then again, the history that they have written for us, it's again false, right? It's again false.
Yeah.
And world is again not two. They cannot divide the world into two. World is so complex.
Right. The human behavior is so complex. Yeah.
So complex.
Right.
Okay, where is Janit?
Yeah, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nandini. Thank you so much.
Yeah, super Teva.
Super Teva.